Hi everybody, it's You Had to Ask, the show where I answer your questions. And this week my first question comes to me from Atheist Bob, who asks, "Hi Steve, I'd be interested to hear your opinion. Do you agree with Christopher Hitchens' statement that religion poisons everything?" I agree with the statement as I understand Hitchens to have meant it. I saw a lot of debates that Hitchens did on his book tour right after the book God Is Not Great first came out in like 2007, where a lot of his debate partners, the Christians that he took on in this series, made a big deal about that subtitle, how religion poisons everything. I remember Dinesh D'Souza spending a lot of time on it. Rabbi Shmuley Bateach spent a lot of time on it. This idea, though, come on, Christopher, you can't be serious. Religion doesn't poison everything. What about? And then they would name all of the good things that religion has been associated with, and they would say, "Oh, what about that? What about that?" And of course, that's not the point. The point of the subtitle, aside from just being provocative and wanting to be sensational and have something on the cover of the book that might entice you to open it and to read it and eventually to buy it, the point of that idea of religion poisoning everything is that even the good that we can associate with religion as it encourages us to be charitable, as it encourages us to be forgiving, as it encourages us to be moral and to be upright and to be honest and so forth, it poisons those things because it tells us that there's a reason for doing them that comes from some sort of higher authority, from a celestial dictator, as Hitchens used to like to refer to the concepts of God in these monotheistic religions, especially. The idea that it's not enough just to be good to each other out of a feeling of empathy or out of a feeling of humanity, out of a feeling of solidarity, looking at other people as our brothers and our sisters. No, 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 no. We're commanded to do it. We're told we have to do it, and if we don't do it, we will be punished. It perverts and infects and reduces the whole moral exercise into something really dirty and petty. And I think that is what he's really getting at when he says religion poisons everything. Even the good stuff. Religion tells you that you're doing it for the wrong reason. And I agree with that absolutely 100%. I would never, ever, ever try to take away from Christianity, for example, since that's the dominant religion in my culture, the good things that it has done, the really good things, the people who have been or feel that they have been pushed by their faith to be better people, to be more charitable, to give more of their time, more of their effort, to be more patient with their children, to be more loving to one another. I know that there are people like that. I know people personally who feel that way. And I would never take any of that away. But what I would say is that these people do these things, or ought to do these things, because they are good, compassionate, empathetic people. Not because the omnipotent Sky Daddy has ordered them to do it for his glory, and if they don't, they risk eternal punishment. That's the poisonous part. McFly88, hey yo, Big Stevie Cool. I believe you've touched on the subject of kids, can't remember, and whether you and your wife plan to have them. But my question is, if you did have a kid/kids, what children's television shows, wholesome and educational or not, from your childhood would you introduce to them? And if you say Power Rangers, I'll unsubscribe. Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. That is the first and usually only show that comes to mind when I'm asked a question like that. And honestly, I watch Mr. Rogers sometimes now. As an adult, as a 33-year-old adult with no children, I still will occasionally watch Mr. Rogers. They have a bunch of episodes streaming free on Amazon if you have Amazon Prime. And it is just the greatest show ever. It's the show that it's instructive. Not only I remember watching it as a kid, I watched it as a child, and it was such a wonderful thing for me. It opened up like parts of the world that I hadn't had a chance to see for myself yet. It treated me as a child with a certain respect and a certain acknowledgement and an assumption that I had some intelligence that I didn't need to be spoken down to. But at the same time, it wasn't over my head. It explained things that needed explaining in a very gentle, loving, informative way. And when I watch it now as an adult, it feels like it's informative of how you should be with children, how you should be as a parent or as a guardian or as an adult figure, a role model. The way Mr. Rogers behaves to his television audience is just it's just one of the greatest shows ever. Just and Mr. Rogers himself, Fred Rogers, just one of the great role models, one of the great characters, hosts, whatever in the history of television. I mean, with such compassion and humanity and patience and wit and warmth and gentleness. There's just no better, to me, there's no better television show to show a child or someone who is interested in children or just in general. It's just a great fucking show. Mr. Rogers, man. There's that's number one, and whatever number two is way, way down there. DZOSU071. Hi, Steve. Lately I've found myself in the middle of a lot of debates about evolution versus creationism. One of the creationists' arguments that I keep encountering is that the math of evolution refutes evolution, that the likelihood of a single-celled organism evolving into anything complex is something like 1 in a trillion, 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 trillion. Of course, I can respond with the argument that even a chance that minute is more likely than a god, but is there a more solid argument I can present? Actually, there's a really good resource for a lot of these arguments against creationism and for evolution. If you Google an index to creationist claims, I think it's affiliated with Talk Origins. It might be hosted on the Talk Origins website, but an index to creationist claims. And if I remember, I'll put a link to it down in the description box of this video. But it is just a great resource of all the common arguments and common questions and challenges that are made by creationists against evolution. And you should go look there because, and I know for a fact that it deals with that question, that question of well, the math, the odds of evolution happening are so astronomical that it just makes no sense to believe it. One of the things I would mention if I were having an argument with someone about that, other than the fact that, as you correctly point out, even an incredibly minute chance of something happening naturally is still more likely than the existence of a god and that god having anything to do with it. That's actually, I think that's a solid argument, but I don't think that will be very persuasive to a creationist. You have to remember that when life arose on Earth for the first time, this was not the result of a single experiment. There were countless similar experiments going on all over the world at the same time. These same sorts of chemical reactions were happening anywhere on the planet that they were capable of happening. So it wasn't just one chance in a trillion, trillion, trillion. It was who knows how many chances. There were so many different chemical reactions going on in the genetic soup simultaneously. And it was bound to happen sometime. That's what I would say. They try to reduce these things and say like, well, you know, they try to make the origin of life into something that just sort of poofed into existence out of this incredibly random series of events. And that's not how it happened. There were chemical reactions separately happening all over the world at the same time. And they were not random. They were very, very precise chemical processes. The things that these substances were doing with each other to form the first proteins, to form the first single-celled organisms, etc. They were governed by laws of physics and laws of chemistry. They were not just it was not just random stuff happening. It was a very orderly process. So that's a good place to start. And yeah, I would definitely look up an index to creationist claims because it has been an invaluable resource to me. And I think it will be to you as well if you haven't checked it out yet. Doctor Who fan, 1989. Why do you think that people still see the term nerd or geek as a bad thing? I find that some people still find that term to be offensive if used to describe them. In my opinion, the only ones that use it in a bad way are jocks and bullies. The way I see it, if you watch a show like Star Trek or Star Wars, aren't you pretty much a nerd? It's not a bad term. I think nerds are awesome. Well, the technical term for what is going on there is reappropriation. That's where a negative term is sort of reclaimed by the group it was originally applied to and turned into something positive. And that has happened among the nerd community with that term, with nerd. And the reason why it's still seen as negative, I think, is because it was originally intended to be negative. It was created by people outside the group who weren't nerds or didn't consider themselves to be nerds to insult people that they perceived as nerds. And that's why it's considered negative. And I mean, the change has been the reappropriation by people who claimed it as a mantle and say, you know what, yeah, I'm a nerd. I don't, that, yeah, okay, call me that. That's fine. I like science fiction. I like whatever. I like comic books. I like whatever. Call me a nerd. That's fine with me. To reclaim it and to make it your own. Uh, that's that. That's what. That's the change that the term has undergone in our language and in our usage over the last few decades. And I guess some people still see it as a negative thing because occasionally it's still used as a negative. But far less than it was even when I was a kid. Even when I'm 33, even when I was a child, I very rarely ever heard the term nerd used in a positive light. And now it's almost always used in a positive light, or at least in kind of a gentle, sort of kidding light. Oh, you're such a nerd. It's not nearly the sort of harsh insult that it was 20, 25 years ago, which is pretty impressive. J. Lawrence Heads. Steve, my favorite videos by you are your 20-minute reviews of movies or movie series. I especially like it when you come to the really bad movies that are so bad that they induce you to drink Boilermaker after Boilermaker. Boilermaker's recipes are as varied as movies or people are. My question is, what is your Boilermaker recipe? The Boilermakers that I drink in those movie review videos are made with beer, and I always like a nice Yingling. That's been my brand for the last couple of years. I was into Stella Artois for a little while, but I don't know, something about Belgian beer seemed a little pretentious, even though it's like the least pretentious import beer that you could probably imagine. Not into the Stella anymore. So a Yingling, right? Pour it into a mug, and then for the depth charge, I go with a shot of Jägermeister. Now, technically, this makes this a Jaeger bomb as well as a Boilermaker, or perhaps Boilermaker would be the umbrella term under which Jaeger bomb would fall. I've done it before with whiskey, with like a Jim Beam Black or a Jack Daniels. I don't like to do that because I don't really dig whiskey to begin with. I don't really like super hard liquor. And I'm not super crazy about Jaeger either. I almost always drink Jaeger in some kind of a mix. The Neon Real Gang makes Jaeger bombs with energy drink like Red Bull or something. But for my movie review videos, I thought it would be both a good visual and just a nice calming effect if I made it with beer and with a Jaeger bomb, with a shot of Jaeger. So here we go. My Boilermaker. It makes me want to review a shitty movie. Tutor 1886. Hi Steve, my questions for next week is this. What is your thoughts on the Batman versus Superman film? Are you worried, excited, looking forward to it, etc.? Second, what would a Steve Shives Superman film look like? As in, how would you go about telling either an origin tale or just any Superman story? Love your channel, man, and keep up the good work. Cheers. Well, hey, this might be a shitty movie I can talk about right here. As people who regularly watch my channel know, I was not too thrilled about Man of Steel, and the Batman versus Superman movie is going to be a sequel to Man of Steel. Same director, I would assume, same screenwriter, same take, same perspective on the character. So I'm not optimistic. But then I think about how the Batman series went, and I was not crazy about Batman Begins either. I liked Batman Begins a lot better than I liked Man of Steel, but I didn't think Batman Begins, and I still don't think Batman Begins is that great of a movie. And yet, The Dark Knight turned out to be a great movie, and I wasn't expecting it to be. I didn't like Batman Begins. I went to see The Dark Knight not really expecting anything special, and it blew me away. I thought it was incredible, and I still think it's just a great movie. So who knows? Maybe the Batman versus Superman Man of Steel sequel will be a case of that. Maybe Zack Snyder will sort of go back to his Watchmen mode, and Watchmen is another movie that I really, really enjoyed. And he'll make something really special. I don't know. My fear at the moment is that Ben Affleck's Batman will be the best part about the movie. And that's not a knock on Affleck, because I really like Ben Affleck, but I'm just, the bit that everybody's bitching about on the internet these days. Oh God, Ben Affleck playing Batman. Something tells me that's going to be the highlight of the film, uh, at least for me. But who knows? Right? The movie hasn't been made yet. I don't know if it's. I hope it's good. As a Superman fan, as a Batman fan, as a movie fan, I hope it's fucking great. So we'll see. We'll see when they make the movie. As for what my Superman film would look like, I don't know. I've said before, the first thing I would have done to improve Man of Steel would be to hack off the Krypton stuff with a hatchet. I think I would not want to do an origin story. I would definitely not want to have anything to do with Krypton. Krypton would be something that is spoken about. We would never see it. We'd never meet anybody who lived there. We would have no flashbacks to Krypton. There would be nothing like that at all. There would be as little Krypton stuff as possible, because the Krypton stuff, to me, is the least interesting part of the character. Krypton, for me, is just an explanation. Is just an explanation of the premise. Where do his powers come from? How can he do these things? Who is this guy? Krypton. We don't need to know what it looked like. We don't need to know where it was. We don't need to know who the people of Krypton were, what they were like, or what their culture was. I could not care less. No Krypton stuff. If I did do an origin story, it would be like young Clark Kent, like teenage, high school age Clark Kent, sort of coming to terms with his alienness and his powers. It would be like a movie version of Smallville, with no Superman suit at all. People would hate my first Superman movie if I did that. But other than that, maybe if I wasn't doing an origin story, I would just pick up with Superman already being Superman. After, it's sort of pick up like with the status quo. He's already working at the Daily Planet. Lois Lane is already there. Perry White, Jimmy Olsen, etc., etc. And we would just have a good old-fashioned Superman story. Maybe pick a nice down-to-earth villain like Metallo, or have Lex doing something, and just tell a fucking nice, cool, inventive, clever, adventurous superhero story. That's what I would like to do. No saving the world stuff. Just a cool, good Superman story. That's what I long for. And either Superman just broke the sound barrier, or it's time for
the lightning round. Rapid fire questions, glib and adequate answers.
Lord Marlin, what are your opinions on anime? Do you have a favorite anime movie or TV series? A recent gem I highly recommend is Wolf Children. I don't claim to watch a lot of movies, but it's the only movie I've ever watched that moved me to tears. Wow. I've never seen Wolf Children. I'm not a huge anime fan, and I definitely haven't kept up with it in recent years. But about 10 years ago or so, I saw Cowboy Bebop, and I thought that was just one of the greatest things I had ever seen. I've seen lots of anime films that I've really liked too. Like I've mentioned before, Wings of Oniamis, Grave of the Fireflies, Princess Mononoke. I thought was really good. So yeah, I've seen a bit of it, and I've really liked a lot of what I've seen. But I wouldn't call myself like a huge fan of it. Nathan Young, hey Steve, what is your favorite Mystery Science Theater? Mine would have to be Night of the Blood Beast. Also, do you prefer Mike or Joel as the host? I'm torn because they both are great in their own way. Thanks. If I had to pick one favorite episode, and it's excruciating to have to pick one favorite episode of Mystery Science Theater because it's one of my favorite shows ever. If I had to pick one, though, it would probably be The Amazing Colossal Man, which also happens to be the first episode of the show that I ever saw. So it was sort of my introduction to the show, and it was when I fell in love with it. And I did a series of videos on my channel last year where it was me sort of locked in like a white room, and I was being tormented by an unseen captor, and I was forced to make all these sadistic nerd choices, like Captain Kirk or Captain Picard. And I think in the second or third episode of that, one of the choice, I think it was the second episode, the choice I had to make was Joel or Mike. And eventually I chose Mike. But it's tough because I love Joel too. Kung Fu Academy Official. Hi, Steve. I've seen a few people ask you this before, and I've heard you make some vague comments in response. But for the record, what's your thoughts on the Iron Man films? Cheers for the channel. Well, I still haven't seen Iron Man 3, so I can't give you an opinion on that. I really, really liked the first Iron Man. I thought the second Iron Man was but I loved Robert Downey Jr. throughout. I just thought I think he's the key to the whole thing. He was one of the things that really made the Avengers work for me as well. So, stick with Downey and you can't go wrong. I really, really enjoyed, especially the first Iron Man. Ryan Swanson, Steve, have you ever switched off a film simply because it disturbed you too much? A film that had that effect on me was Solo. I eventually finished the film after stopping it 5 times. That's interesting. Solo I have not seen, but Solo is a film I've always wanted to see because I'm such an admirer of its director, Pier Paolo Pasolini, who directed one of the greatest, if not the greatest, film about Jesus ever made, Il Vangelo di San Matteo, the Gospel according to Saint Matthew. So I haven't seen Solo, but I really want to see it. And now that you've said you had to stop it 5 times, I really want to see it. I've never actually stopped a movie because it disturbed me too much. I've stopped movies because I thought they were shit or because they bored the piss out of me, but I've never stopped one because it disturbed me too much. Pokemaster4555. Why doesn't your wife take your last name? Was it because she really likes her last name or doesn't like yours? Or is it something of principle to her? It's kind of something of principle to both of us. Before we got married, we talked about it a few times, and I think we both agreed that I wasn't going to take her last name, so why should she be expected to take my last name? It's kind of a sexist custom. And look, if you get married and the woman wants to take the man's name, if she really wants to, there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not shitting on people doing that, taking part in that tradition if it means something to them. But I think we both agreed that it was kind of a silly tradition, and we didn't want to do it, so we didn't do it. Cheshire Cat. Hey Steve, what did you do for Thanksgiving? It actually turned out to be one of the best Thanksgivings I've had in a really, really long time. I had a really bad headache, and we skipped out on both my wife's family's festivities and my family's meal. We missed both family meals that we had planned to attend because I just felt really terrible. But there's a grocery store near me that was open until 6 on Thanksgiving, and I was able to get out there and buy some food. I bought a chicken and some mashed potatoes and some other side items, and we came home. And after we were both feeling a little better, we had a nice little Thanksgiving dinner here, just the two of us. And it was the best Thanksgiving I've had in years. Noisy Records. Since you're a Batman fan, who are your favorite Batman writers other than the obvious Denny O'Neil, early Frank Miller, etc.? Well, as a comic book fan, I am a child of the early 90s. That's when I first got into the characters. Of course, I loved Alan Grant. I loved, to a lesser extent, Chuck Dixon. I mean, Chuck Dixon was okay. Chuck Dixon had his moments where he was really great. Who else? From a little bit before my time, but since I've caught up on him since, Steve Englehart I thought was just terrific. So there were, Doug Moench was okay. I mean, there was sort of a circle of Batman writers working at the time in the early 90s when I first got into the character that I still have sort of affection for. But yeah, Alan Grant is a big one. I remember really liking his stuff a lot. Help 4343. Do you like Bjork? I really liked her in Dancer in the Dark, but other than that, I really don't have much of a use for her. What little of her music that I've heard, I've found pretentious and overwrought. So no, I'm not a huge Bjork fan, but Dancer in the Dark was just a punch to the gut, and she was great in it. Owari Nico, if you could invent any holiday, what would it be like? My holiday would be everybody stay home and do whatever you want day. And I think the name is kind of self-explanatory there. Adderall Apocalypse, a couple of questions. One, do mushrooms when being sauteed smell like cum to you, or is it just me? 2, have you ever taken a shit so big that it pressed up against your prostate gland and made you come a little? Adderall Apocalypse, I just want to thank you for the 2 most wonderful questions I've ever received on You Had to Ask. To answer the first one, I don't think I remember ever sauteing mushrooms that smelled like cum. Maybe that's just you, or maybe I'm either using the wrong or the right kind of mushrooms. Number 2, no, I've never taken a shit so big that it made me come a little. Although I take it from the question that you have. And I have a strange kind of envy for you at the moment. I'm not sure. It makes me uncomfortable. Hey, that's it. Before I go, I want to give a shout out, and I'm sure that the party I'm shouting at will appreciate coming right on the tail end of the shit so big it makes you come question. The shout out this week goes to my friend Jason Brunet, who has an awesome YouTube channel under the handle jeffthefish.com. Jason has lately been doing this regular series called What Happened on Twitter Today, where he, usually appearing to be slightly drunk, will just read tweets from his Twitter feed. And it sounds so simple, but it's just magic. You know, his tone and his attitude and the way he reads it. And it's just such a great series. If you haven't seen Jason's stuff, and I bet a lot of you haven't, check out Jason Brunet's YouTube channel, and especially check out What Happened on Twitter Today, because it is such a fun series. And usually the videos aren't very long, they're just a few minutes, and I laugh every time I watch it. It's just terrific. And he's also a musician. He's a singer and a songwriter. He writes his own songs and he performs them, some bitches too. And he's good. He's good. He's a fellow Hank Williams fan. So you know he's got the right influences. So check out his music. Check out What Happened on Twitter Today. Just a really fun YouTube channel that most of you probably haven't seen, and you should definitely check out. And he's a good dude, god damn it. So that's it for this week. I will be back next week to do this all over again, provided, of course, that you ask me some questions that I can answer. Because in order for me to do this, you have to ask. So leave a comment on this video asking me your question. Any subject is open. Ask me anything about anything. Nothing is too serious. Nothing is too silly and frivolous. I will answer as many of them as I possibly can. And until then, I will see you. Have a good week. See you next time.